The twin girls knocked on the car window of the most dangerous man in Chicago, and he opened the door. In a city where power is measured in fear and mercy is a weakness that gets you killed, Albert Russo had built an empire on ice-cold decisions and calculated brutality. But on Christmas Eve, 2 4-year-old girls with his own dark eyes were about to teach him that the strongest thing a man can do is kneel down to a child's level and say, "You're safe now." Welcome to our channel, where broken men find their hearts in the most impossible places. And redemption isn't just a word. It's a war fought one gentle moment at a time. If you believe that even the most ruthless souls deserve a second chance, hit that subscribe button and smash the like to support stories that make you feel something real. Drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. We love hearing from you. Now let's see how one freezing night changed 3 lives forever. The December wind cut through Chicago, like a blade, merciless and sharp. Albert Russo sat in the back of his black Escalade outside Northwestern Memorial Hospital, finishing a phone call that would ruin someone's life. His voice was low, controlled, final. "You have until midnight to transfer the property. After that, I stop being reasonable." He ended the call without waiting for an answer. Reasonable. The word tasted like ash in his mouth. Albert Russo had never been reasonable. He'd been efficient, ruthless, and untouchable. At 38, he controlled half of Chicago's underground through sheer calculated terror and strategic intelligence. People didn't cross him. They didn't dare. The knock on his window was so soft he almost missed it. Albert's hand moved instinctively toward the gun at his hip before his brain registered what he was seeing through the tinted glass. A child. No, 2 children. Identical twin girls, maybe 4 years old, their small faces pressed against the cold window, breath fogging the glass. They were shaking violently, wearing thin pajamas covered by coats that were far too small, already soaked through with snow. He lowered the window halfway, and freezing air rushed in along with their desperation. "Sir," the first girl whispered, her lips nearly blue. "Please. Mommy won't wake up and we're so cold." The second girl, identical down to the terror in her dark eyes, added in a voice that cracked, "The nurses said we can't stay inside anymore. They said we have to leave." Albert stared at them. 4 years in the brutal machinery of organized crime had taught him to spot a con, a setup, a trap. But these children, their fear was too raw, too real. Their shivers weren't performative. The wet pajama fabric clinging to their small bodies, the way their teeth chattered between words, the absolute panic in their eyes. This wasn't theater. "Where's your mother?" His voice came out harsher than he intended. "Inside," the first girl said, pointing toward the hospital with a trembling hand. "She's sleeping in the scary room with all the machines. They said she won't wake up for a long time. Maybe never." The second girl's face crumpled. "We don't have anywhere to go. It's so cold and we're scared and we don't know what to do." Albert should have driven away. Should have told his driver to find hospital security, let the system handle 2 homeless children. He had a meeting in an hour, business that required his complete attention, decisions that would shift power, across 3 states. 2 orphaned kids weren't his problem, but something in their faces stopped him cold. Maybe it was the way they looked at him, not with the fear he was used to seeing in adult eyes, but with hope. Desperate, childish hope that the man in the expensive car would help, because adults were supposed to help. They had no idea who he was. No idea that Albert Russo was the last person they should be asking for mercy. Or maybe it was something else, something he couldn't name, but felt like recognition crawling up his spine. "Get in the car," he heard himself say. The girls hesitated for only a second before the cold won over caution. They scrambled into the heated interior, and Albert watched them collapse onto the leather seats, their small bodies still trembling, but already starting to thaw in the warmth. His driver, Marco, glanced in the rearview mirror with barely concealed shock. In 15 years of working for Albert Russo, he'd never seen his boss pick up children. "Take us inside," Albert said quietly. "I want to know what's going on." The hospital's ICU was a cathedral of beeping machines and hushed tragedy. Albert followed a nurse through sterile hallways while the twins clutched his coat, one on each side, their small, cold hands gripping the expensive fabric like lifelines. The nurse kept glancing at him nervously, clearly sensing something dangerous in his presence but too professional to comment. "The patient is Angelina Torres," the nurse said, checking her clipboard. 29 years old, admitted 3 days ago with severe head trauma, broken ribs, internal bleeding. She was beaten nearly to death. Police are investigating, but she hasn't regained consciousness. Albert's jaw tightened. "And the children?" "They've been here since she was admitted. We let them stay in the waiting room, but..." The nurse's voice dropped. "We can't keep them indefinitely. Social services was called, but with the holiday they're overwhelmed. The girls were supposed to be picked up this morning, but no one came. They stopped outside a room with glass walls. Through the window, Albert saw her. The world tilted. Angelina. 5 years collapsed into nothing. 5 years since she'd disappeared from his life without explanation, leaving only a note that said, 'I'm sorry. You'll understand someday.' 5 years of forcing himself not to look for her, not to use his resources to track her down, because if she wanted to be gone, he'd respect that. She was barely recognizable. Her face was swollen, bruised purple and black. Tubes ran from her arms, her mouth, machines monitoring every fragile breath. But it was her. The curve of her cheekbone, the shape of her hands resting on the white sheets. He'd memorized those details in the 6 months they'd had together before she vanished. "Mommy's sleeping," one of the girls whispered, pressing her face against the glass. "She's been sleeping for so long." Albert's brain was moving too, fast connecting pieces he didn't want to see. The twins. 4 years old. Dark hair. Dark eyes that matched his own in the reflection of the glass. "No." "What are your names?" he asked, his voice carefully controlled. "I'm Amy," the girl on his left said. "Lily," said the other. "And your last name?" "Torres, like Mommy." "Not Russo." "Of course not." Angelina had made sure of that. "How old are you?" "We just turned 4. Amy said proudly. "Our birthday was in March." Albert did the math. Automatically. Conception would have been June. 5 years ago. Right before Angelina disappeared. He looked at the girls again. Really looked. The shape of their faces. The set of their jaws. The way they stood. Even at 4 years old. With a certain stubborn tilt to their chins that he saw in the mirror every morning. "Sir?" Lily tugged his coat. "Can we stay with you? Just until Mommy wakes up? We promise we'll be good. We'll be so quiet you won't even know we're there." Amy nodded, desperately. "Please, we don't have anywhere else." Albert Russo had made a career out of cold calculation, but standing in that hospital corridor with 2 children who might be his daughters, looking at a woman he'd never stopped loving, lying broken in a hospital bed, every carefully constructed wall inside him began to crack. "Yeah," he said quietly, kneeling down to their level. His knees protested against the cold floor, but he stayed there, looking into their frightened faces. "You can stay, with me." The relief that flooded their small faces nearly broke him. "Really? Lily whispered. Really, but first we need to get you warm, fed, and into dry clothes. Then we'll figure out everything else. As he led them back through the hospital, Albert's mind was already moving through logistics. Security for the mansion, background check on whoever hurt Angelina, DNA test to confirm what his gut already knew, legal guardianship paperwork, protection detail in case whoever did this came back. But underneath the strategic planning, something else was happening. Something he hadn't felt in years. The twins' hands in his, their complete trust in a stranger. The way they looked up at him like he could fix everything. It terrified him more than any rival ever had. Because Albert Russo knew how to destroy empires. He had no idea how to protect 2 4-year-old girls. But as they stepped out into the freezing Chicago night, and he lifted them both into his car, wrapping his coat around their shivering bodies, he knew one thing with absolute certainty. Anyone who tried to hurt these children would learn exactly why people feared his name. The mansion was silent when they arrived. Albert's estate sat 30 minutes outside downtown Chicago, hidden behind iron gates and mature oak trees that had witnessed 100 winters. The house itself was a monument to wealth and isolation. 3 stories of stone and glass, modern architecture softened by warm lighting that spilled through floor-to-ceiling windows. Amy and Lily pressed their faces against the car window as they drove up the long driveway, their eyes wide. "Is this a castle?" Amy whispered. "Do you live here all by yourself?" Lily asked, turning to look at Albert with something like concern. That question landed harder than it should have. "Yes," he said simply. "That's sad," Lily decided. "Houses should have families." Marco pulled up to the front entrance, and Albert's head of household staff, Rosa, was already waiting. She was 60, efficient, and unshakable. She'd worked for the Russo family since Albert was a teenager. Nothing surprised Rosa, until now. Her eyes widened fractionally as Albert stepped out of the car carrying 2 small girls, one in each arm. "Rosa, I need the guest suite on the 2nd floor prepared immediately. Clean clothes for children, age 4, dinner, and complete discretion." "Of course, Mr. Russo." Rosa's professionalism snapped back into place, but Albert caught the question in her eyes. In 15 years of managing his household, she'd never seen him bring home children. Inside, the mansion's warmth enveloped them. The twins stared at everything. The marble floors, the chandelier in the entrance hall, the sweeping staircase. But they didn't let go of Albert's hands. "Are we really allowed to be here?" Amy asked nervously. "You're my guests," Albert said, guiding them toward the stairs. "That means you're safe here. No one will hurt you. No one will make you leave." Lily's grip tightened. "Promise?" The word stuck in his throat. Albert Russo didn't make promises he couldn't guarantee, and he'd learned young that safety was an illusion. But looking down at her frightened face, he found himself saying, "I promise." The guest suite had been transformed by the time they reached it. Rosa had somehow manifested warm pajamas, fluffy robes, and stuffed animals in under 10 minutes. A fire crackled in the fireplace, and the 4-poster bed had been piled with extra blankets. "There's a bathroom through there," Albert said, pointing. "Rosa will help you take a warm bath and get into dry clothes. Then we'll have dinner." But neither girl moved. "What's wrong?" Albert asked, crouching down again. "Will you stay?" Lily's voice was so small. "We don't like being alone." Something in his chest constricted. "I'll be right outside the door. I'm not leaving." Amy shook her head. "That's what Mommy said before the ambulance came. She said she'd be right there, but then she went to sleep and didn't wake up." The fear in her voice was ancient, primal. The fear every child has of abandonment, made real by trauma. Albert looked at Rosa, who nodded understanding. "How about this?" he said carefully. "Rosa will help you with your bath, and I'll sit right here in this chair by the fire. I won't leave the room. When you come out, I'll still be here." The twins considered this, then nodded. 20 minutes later, they emerged in oversized pajamas, their hair damp and curling, their faces scrubbed clean. They looked even younger without the grime of 3 days living in a hospital. And they looked so much like him it was almost painful. Albert was exactly where he'd promised to be, sitting in the armchair, still wearing his suit. He'd removed his jacket and rolled up his sleeves, trying to look less intimidating. He wasn't sure it worked. "See?" he said. "Still here." Lily ran to him immediately, climbing into his lap without asking permission. Amy followed, more hesitant, but ultimately unable to resist the pull of comfort. Albert froze for a moment. These small, warm bodies pressed against him, then slowly wrapped his arms around them. He couldn't remember the last time he'd held someone like this. Couldn't remember the last time someone had trusted him with their vulnerability. "Dinner is served in the small dining room," Rosa announced softly from the doorway. The small dining room could seat 12, but Rosa had wisely set only 3 places at one end of the long mahogany table. She'd prepared simple comfort food, tomato soup, grilled cheese, apple slices, and the twins ate with the desperate hunger of children who'd been surviving on hospital vending machines. Albert watched them, barely touching his own food. Amy ate methodically, carefully. Lily kept glancing at him between bites, as if checking that he was still there. "Do you have kids?" Amy asked suddenly. The question hit like a physical blow. "No," Albert said. Then, because he couldn't help himself, "Do you have a father?" Both girls went very still. Lily's spoon clattered against her bowl. "Mommy said our daddy had to go away before we were born," Amy said carefully, as if repeating words she'd memorized. "She said he didn't know about us. And that's okay because we have each other." Albert's hands clenched under the table. "Did she ever tell you his name?" Amy shook her head. "She said maybe someday when we were bigger. She has a picture of him in her special box, but we're not allowed to look." "What about—" Albert had to force the next words out. "Who hurt your mother?" The temperature in the room dropped. Both girls stopped eating entirely. "Peter," Lily whispered, and even saying the name made her shrink into herself. "Mommy's husband. But he's not our daddy. He came after we were born." "Peter Blake," Amy added, her voice shaking. "He was nice at first. He gave Mommy flowers and took us to the park. But then he changed. He got mean, especially when he drank the brown bottles." Albert's blood turned to ice water. "How long was he mean?" "A long time," Lily said. "He said we were mistakes. He said Mommy should have gotten rid of us before we were born. He hit Mommy a lot," Amy continued, clinical now, detached in the way traumatized children learn to be. "We had to hide in the closet when he got angry. Mommy told us to cover our ears and sing songs so we couldn't hear. But we heard anyway," Lily finished quietly. Albert's vision blurred red at the edges. He wanted to ask more, needed to know everything, but the girls were starting to shake again, their breathing quickening with panic. "Hey," he said gently, using every ounce of control he possessed to keep his voice calm. "You're safe now. Peter isn't here. He can't hurt you or your mother anymore." "How do you know?" Amy challenged, and there was so much fear beneath her defiance. "Everyone said we'd be safe before, but he always found us." Albert leaned forward, holding both their gazes. "Because I won't let him. And when I make a promise, I keep it." The certainty in his voice seemed to reach them. The shaking eased slightly. After dinner, Albert carried them back upstairs. They were drooping with exhaustion, but when he tried to put them in the bed, they both clung to him. "Will you stay?" Amy asked. "Just until we fall asleep?" Albert looked at the bed, at these two small girls who were probably his daughters, who'd been terrorized and abandoned and were now asking him, a man who dealt in violence and fear, to keep the nightmares away. "I'll stay," he said. He sat on the edge of the bed, and they curled up on either side of him, their small bodies pressed against his legs. He'd never felt more out of his depth. He knew how to negotiate million-dollar deals, how to orchestrate complex operations, how to dismantle rival organizations piece by piece. He had no idea how to comfort children, but as their breathing slowly evened out, as Amy's hand relaxed around his sleeve, and Lily's death grip on his other hand finally loosened, Albert felt something he hadn't experienced in 20 years. Purpose that had nothing to do with power. When he was certain they were asleep, he carefully extracted himself and stood. In the dim firelight, he looked at their faces, peaceful now, free of fear for the first time in days. They looked like Angelina. They looked like him. He pulled out his phone and texted his most trusted associate. "Run a complete background check on Peter Blake, Chicago area, married to Angelina Torres. I want everything: criminal history, financials, known associates, current location. Priority 1. Then he texted his private doctor. "I need a DNA test. Discreet. Tomorrow morning. 2 subjects." As he left the room, leaving the door cracked open and posting one of his men in the hallway, Albert's mind was already working through scenarios. If the test confirmed what he already knew, in his bones, everything would change. He had daughters, children who'd been suffering while he'd been building an empire, completely unaware they existed, and someone named Peter Blake had brutalized the woman Albert had loved and terrorized his children. Albert walked to his study and poured himself 2 fingers of scotch. He didn't drink it. He just stood at the window, looking out at the snow-covered grounds, processing. The monster inside him, the part that could order executions without, flinching, that could watch men beg and feel nothing, was screaming for blood. Demanding he find Peter Blake and introduce him to every method of suffering Albert had learned in 2 decades of warfare. But the man he was trying to become, the man those 2 little girls needed, couldn't solve this with violence alone. For the first time in his life, Albert Russo had to be more than a weapon. He had to be a father. The DNA test came back on the 3rd day. Albert sat in his study, the lab results in his hands, staring at words that confirmed what his heart had already known. 99.9% probability of paternity. Amy and Lily were his daughters. He'd spent the last 72 hours watching them slowly come back to life. The first morning, they'd woken up screaming from nightmares, and Albert had run into their room to find them huddled together, crying for their mother. He'd sat with them until sunrise, completely helpless, not knowing what to say or do except stay. The second day, they'd eaten breakfast in cautious silence, still waiting for the moment this safety would be ripped away. But Lily had asked if she could draw, and Albert had emptied an entire office supply closet onto the dining room table. They'd covered the marble floors with crayon masterpieces. Houses with families, suns with faces, flowers in impossible colors. Amy had drawn a picture of 3 stick figures. "That's me, Lily, and you," she'd explained, pointing. "You're tall." Now, on the 3rd day, Albert held proof of their connection in his hands, and the weight of it was crushing. He had daughters, 4 years old. 4 years of their lives he'd missed because Angelina had chosen to disappear, to raise them alone, to marry a monster who'd hurt them. Why? The question had been eating at him since the hospital. Why hadn't she told him? He'd loved her, recklessly, completely, in a way that had terrified him. When she'd left, he'd respected her decision because he'd assumed she had reasons. But if she was carrying his children? His phone buzzed. Marco's name on the screen. "Talk to me," Albert answered. Peter Blake, 34, former Chicago PD, discharged 5 years ago for excessive force complaints. 3 domestic violence calls from neighbors at his last address, all dropped when the victim refused to press charges. Married Angelina Torres 2 years ago. He's got gambling debts north of 50 grand with some very ugly people. Albert's grip tightened on the phone. Current location. That's the problem, boss. He disappeared the same day Angelina was admitted to the hospital. Hasn't been seen since. His apartment's cleared out. He's in the wind. Find him. Already on it. But Albert... Marco's voice dropped. Word on the street is he's asking around about you. Someone saw the girls leaving the hospital with you. He knows. Ice flooded Albert's veins. Increase security on the estate. No one in or out without my personal authorization. And I want to know the second anyone has eyes on Blake. He ended the call and sat back, processing. Peter Blake was ex-cop, which meant he had training, contacts, and the kind of dangerous desperation that came from having nothing left to lose. A knock on the study door pulled him from his thoughts. Come in. Rosa entered, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. Mr. Russo, the girls are asking for you. They want to know if you'll have lunch with them. Something in his chest eased. Tell them yes. And, sir. Rosa hesitated. They're different when you're around. Calmer. They feel safe with you. Albert nodded, not trusting his voice. Lunch was sandwiches cut into triangles and apple juice in plastic cups. The twins sat on either side of him at the kitchen island. Rosa had wisely abandoned the formal dining room in favor of something more intimate. Can we visit Mommy today? Lily asked, swinging her legs that didn't quite reach the floor. Albert had been dreading this question. The hospital says she's stable, but she's still sleeping. It might be scary for you to see her with all those machines. We've already seen her like that, Amy said pragmatically. For 3 whole days. We're not scared of the machines. We're scared we'll forget what her voice sounds like. The observation gutted him. Please, Lily added. We need to tell her we're okay, in case she can hear us in her sleep. Albert looked at their hopeful faces and couldn't find it in himself to refuse. Okay, we'll go this afternoon. The twins cheered, and for a moment, they looked like normal children instead of traumatized survivors. At the hospital, Albert's presence caused a stir. Nurses whispered. Security stiffened. Everyone in Chicago knew Albert Russo's face, knew what he represented. But the sight of him holding 2 little girls' hands, speaking softly to them as they walked through the ICU, created a cognitive dissonance that left people staring. Angelina's room was quieter now. Some of the more aggressive machines had been removed, replaced by gentler monitoring, but she was still unconscious, her face still a canvas of healing bruises. The twins ran to her bedside, climbing onto the chairs someone had thoughtfully positioned there. Hi, Mommy, Amy said, taking Angelina's hand. We're okay. We found someone to keep us safe until you wake up. His name is Albert, Lily added, stroking her mother's arm. He's really tall, and his house is like a castle, and he lets us draw on the floors. Albert stood back, watching this scene that was both beautiful and devastating. These girls, talking to their unconscious mother with such perfect faith that she could hear them. He's nice, Mommy, Amy continued. He doesn't yell, and he doesn't smell like those brown bottles, and he promised he won't leave. I think you'd like him. If only Amy knew. Mommy, can you wake up now? Lily's voice cracked. We miss you so much. We need you. Albert's eyes burned. He moved closer, putting a hand on each girl's shoulder. It's okay, he said quietly. She knows you're here. She knows you love her. A doctor appeared in the doorway. Dr. Sarah Chen, who'd been overseeing Angelina's care. She gestured for Albert to step out into the hallway. "Mr. Russo," she said carefully, clearly trying to figure out his connection to the patient. "I wanted to update you on Angelina's condition. The swelling in her brain is decreasing. Her vitals are improving. These are good signs." "When will she wake up?" "It's hard to say. Could be days, could be weeks. The brain heals on its own timeline. But I'm cautiously optimistic." "And when she does wake up," Albert asked, "will there be permanent damage?" Dr. Chen's expression softened. "We won't know until it happens. But Mr. Russo, I need to ask, what's your relationship to the patient and the children, for our records?" Albert looked back through the window at Amy and Lily, still talking to their sleeping mother. "I'm their father," he said. Words felt both foreign and absolutely right. "I only recently found out, but I'm their father, and I'll be handling all medical expenses and decisions going forward." Dr. Chen's eyes widened slightly, but she nodded professionally. "I'll update the records. And Mr. Russo, those girls are lucky to have you." He wasn't sure about that, but as they left the hospital an hour later, the twins each holding one of his hands, chattering about how Mommy's bruises looked better, Albert felt something settling into place inside him. That evening, after dinner, he found himself in an unfamiliar position, sitting on the floor of the living room, surrounded by toys Rosa had acquired from somewhere, watching his daughters play. "Do you want to be the princess or the dragon?" Lily asked, holding up 2 stuffed animals. "I don't think I'd make a good princess," Albert said dryly. "Then you're the dragon," Amy decided. "But a nice dragon, who protects the princess instead of stealing her." A nice dragon who protects. Albert could work with that. They played for an hour, and Albert found himself laughing, at their imaginative stories. Lily narrated everything dramatically. Amy directed the action with serious precision. When they started yawning, he carried them upstairs for bed. The routine was becoming familiar. Pajamas, teeth brushing, choosing which stuffed animal to sleep with. One more glass of water. One more hug. "Albert?" Amy said as he tucked the blankets around them. "Yeah? Are you going to keep us? Even after Mommy wakes up?" The question stopped his heart. "Because we like it here," Lily added quickly. "We feel safe, and you're really good at being a dad even though you said you don't have kids." Albert sat on the edge of the bed, looking at their faces in the dim nightlight glow. "I want to tell you something," he said carefully. "But I need you to listen all the way through, okay?" They nodded, suddenly serious. "A long time ago, before you were born, I knew your mommy. We cared about each other very much. But then she had to go away, and I didn't know she was going to have you. I didn't know you existed." Amy's eyes went wide. "You're our daddy?" "The DNA test says yes. You're my daughters." Lily processed this for a moment. "Is that why we look like you?" Amy said our eyes are the same. "That's exactly why." "So," Amy worked through the logic, "when Mommy wakes up, we won't have to go away? We can stay with you? Like a real family?" "If that's what you want, and if that's what your mother agrees to, then yes. You'll never have to be scared again. You'll never have to hide in closets or cover your ears. I'll make sure of it." Both girls launched themselves at him, wrapping their small arms around his neck with such force he almost toppled backward. "We want to stay," Lily whispered against his shoulder. "We want you to be our daddy." Albert held them, these small, fierce humans who'd chosen to trust him, and felt years of ice cracking inside his chest. "Then that's what I'll be," he said quietly. "Your daddy. For as long as you'll let me." That night, after they finally fell asleep, Albert stood at the window of his bedroom, looking out at the winter darkness. Tomorrow he'd continue hunting Peter Blake. Tomorrow he'd start legal proceedings to establish custody. Tomorrow he'd deal with the empire that still required his attention. But tonight, he was a man who'd just been given the most dangerous gift in the world, something to lose. And he'd burn Chicago to the ground before he let anyone take it away. The nightmare came at 2 a.m. Albert woke to screaming, raw, terrified, the kind that pierces through walls and sanity. He was out of bed and running before his brain fully engaged, his hand automatically reaching for the gun he'd started keeping in the nightstand. The twins' room was chaos. Both girls were sitting up in bed, screaming for their mother, their small bodies rigid with terror. Amy had wet the bed. Lily was hyperventilating, her breath coming in sharp gasps. Hey, I'm here," Albert said, holstering the gun and moving to them quickly. "You're safe. It was just a dream." But they couldn't hear him through their panic. Lily's breathing was getting worse, her lips starting to turn blue. Albert recognized the signs of a panic attack. He'd had enough of his own to know. "Lily, look at me. Look right at me." He cupped her small face in his hands, forcing her unfocused eyes to meet his. "Breathe with me. In through your nose. Slow, that's it. Out through your mouth. Good. Again. In and out." He breathed with her, exaggerated and slow, until her breathing started to match his. Amy had stopped screaming but was crying silently, rocking back and forth. "Can you tell me what you dreamed about?" Albert asked gently once Lily could breathe again. "The bad man," Amy whispered. "Peter. He found us and he was so angry and he hurt Mommy again. And you weren't there to stop him, but I am here," Albert interrupted firmly. "Right here. And no one is going to hurt you. Not Peter. Not anyone." "You don't know that," Lily's voice rose, edging back toward hysteria. "He always comes back. He always finds us. Mommy tried to keep us safe before and he still hurt her." Albert's heart cracked. These children had been living in terror for so long that safety felt like a lie. "Come with me," he said, making a decision. He led them through the quiet mansion, down the stairs, past the formal rooms they'd only glimpsed. They went all the way down to the basement level, a place he never took anyone, his security center. Banks of monitors showed every angle of the estate, motion sensors, pressure plates, thermal imaging, 3 guards on duty, rotating shifts. The perimeter was lit up like daylight on the screens. "See this?" Albert said, pointing to the displays. "This is every entrance to the property, every window, every door, every possible way someone could try to get in. And see these people?" He indicated the guards. "They work for me. Their only job is to keep you safe. And if somehow, someone got past all of this, they'd still have to go through me." Amy and Lily stared at the screens, their fear slowly giving way to cautious wonder. "No one's ever getting close enough to hurt you," Albert continued. "You understand? This isn't like before. I have resources your mother didn't have. I have people, technology, experience. Peter Blake isn't going to just show up at our door." "But what if he does?" Lily asked in a small voice. Albert knelt down, looking both girls in the eyes. "Then I will stop him. Permanently." Something in his tone must have convinced them because both girls sagged with relief. They ended up in Albert's room that night. He changed the sheets while they waited in the hallway, got them into dry pajamas, and let them crawl into his massive bed. They curled up on either side of him, small warm bundles under the covers. "Albert?" Amy said into the darkness. "Yeah?" Did you have bad dreams when you were little? The question caught him off guard. He was quiet for so long they probably thought he wouldn't answer. Yes, he finally said. What did you dream about? Another long silence. Albert had spent 25 years not talking about his childhood, not thinking about it, burying it under power and control in carefully constructed walls. But these were his daughters, and they'd shared their nightmares with him. I dreamed about my father, he said quietly. He wasn't a good man. He drank, like Peter. And when he drank, he got angry. At my mother. At me. Both girls had gone very still, listening. My mother tried to protect me, Albert continued, the words coming easier now in the darkness. She'd hide me in the closet when he got bad. Tell me to cover my ears and sing songs. Like our mommy did, Lily whispered. Yeah, like your mommy. But one night, when I was 7, she couldn't hide me fast enough. My father was too drunk, too angry. I tried to stop him from hurting her, and he... Albert's throat tightened. He broke my arm. 2 places. Amy's hand found his in the dark, squeezing tight. My mother took me to the hospital and told them I fell downstairs. I was too scared to tell the truth. We went home, and it happened again. And again. For 3 more years. What happened when you were 10? Lily asked. Albert exhaled slowly. My father came home drunk and angry. My mother tried to calm him down, but it didn't work. He started hitting her, and she fell. Hit her head on the kitchen table. He paused, the memory still vivid after 28 years. She didn't get back up. She died? Amy's voice was barely audible. Yes. And my father, he realized what he'd done, and he ran. Left me there with her. The neighbors found me hours later, still trying to wake her up. That's so sad, Lily whispered, and he felt her small body press closer to his side. I went into foster care after that, bounced around different homes for a few years. None of them were good. Some were worse than home had been. How did you get away? Amy asked. I got big, got strong. At 16, I ran away and never went back. I promised myself 2 things that day. I would never be weak enough to be hurt again, and I would never ever let anyone hurt a child while I had the power to stop it. The room was quiet except for their breathing. Is, that why you helped us? Lily asked. Because of your promise? Partly, Albert admitted, but also because you're mine, and I protect what's mine. We're glad you found us, Amy said, her voice thick with sleep. Even though Mommy's hurt and Peter's out there somewhere and we're scared, we're glad we knocked on your car window. Me too, sweetheart. Me too. They fell asleep like that, the 3 of them tangled together in the darkness. And for the first time since his mother died, Albert let himself feel the grief he'd locked away. Not just for the boy he'd been, but for the years he'd missed with his daughters, for the suffering they'd endured while he was building an empire instead of a family. The next morning, he called Dr. Chen. I need to ask you about trauma, he said. In children, how long does it take to heal? That depends on many factors, Dr. Chen said carefully. The severity of the trauma, the consistency of their new environment, whether they receive professional help. Why? Because my daughters have nightmares, panic attacks. Amy wet the bed last night for the first time since they arrived. I need to know how to help them. Mr. Russo, what you're describing is very normal for children who've witnessed domestic violence. Their sense of safety has been shattered. Rebuilding that takes time, consistency, and usually therapy. Then set it up. Whatever they need, the best child trauma specialist in Chicago. I can make some recommendations, Dr. Chen said. But Mr. Russo, you should know, healing isn't linear. They might get better, then worse again when a trigger happens. You'll need patience. I have patience, Albert said, surprising himself with the truth of it. That afternoon, he took the girls back to the hospital. They'd been asking to see Angelina every day, and Albert had learned that sometimes the best thing he could do was say yes. This time, he stayed in the room with them instead of waiting in the hallway. He watched them talk to their unconscious mother, telling her about their week, about the mansion, about their new rooms that Rosa was helping them decorate, about their father. "Mommy, Albert is really our daddy," Amy explained, holding Angelina's hand. "We did a science test and everything. He knew you before, a long time ago. Did you know we look like him?" Albert's chest tightened. He wondered what Angelina would say when she woke up. If she'd be angry that he'd taken the girls. If she'd hate him for the choices she'd made being revealed. If she'd still love him after 5 years of silence. "Mommy, you have to wake up soon," Lily said, her voice breaking. "We need you. Albert's trying really hard, but he doesn't know how to braid hair or make your special pancakes or sing the bedtime song right. We need you to come back and teach him." Something changed in the room. A shift Albert felt more than saw. Angelina's hand, the one Amy was holding, moved. Just a flutter, barely visible. But it moved. "Did you see that?" Amy breathed. "Mommy moved her hand." Albert was already pressing the call button. "Doctor, now." Dr. Chen arrived within minutes, along with 2 nurses. They checked Angelina's vitals, examined her responses, spoke to her in calm voices, asking her to squeeze hands, move fingers. And slowly, impossibly, Angelina's eyes opened. They were unfocused at first, confused, struggling to make sense of the lights and sounds. But then they found her daughter's faces, and something cleared in them. "Babies," she whispered, her voice rough from disuse. Amy and Lily were crying, laughing, holding on to her with desperate relief. "Mommy, you're awake. You came back." Angelina's gaze moved past them, searching, and found Albert standing in the corner. Their eyes met, and the world contracted to just that moment. 5 years of questions. 5 years of absence. 5 years of a life she'd built without him. "Albert," she breathed. And there was so much in that one word. Recognition, fear, regret, and something else he couldn't name. "Welcome back, Angelina," he said quietly. And everything, absolutely everything, was about to change. "Everyone out," Dr. Chen said firmly. "Ms. Torres needs rest, and we need to run some tests now that she's conscious." Albert expected the twins to protest, but they were too overjoyed to argue. They kissed their mother's bruised cheeks and promised to come back soon, their voices bright with relief. As the girls were led into the hallway by a nurse, Angelina's hand shot out, grasping Albert's wrist with surprising strength for someone who'd just woken from a week-long coma. "Don't," she whispered. "Don't tell them. Not yet." Albert stared down at her, his jaw tight. "Tell them what? That you've been awake for 30 seconds? They already know, Angelina. About us. About before." Her eyes were desperate, pleading. "Please." "Too late," Albert said quietly, not unkindly. "They know I'm their father. DNA test confirmed. It 3 days ago." The color drained from her already pale face. "Albert, I can explain. Not here, not now. You rest. Get stronger. We'll talk when you're ready." He pulled his wrist free gently and walked out, leaving her with the medical team. In the hallway, Amy and Lily were practically vibrating with excitement. "She's awake. She knows us. Did you see how she smiled?" Lily was talking a mile a minute. "When can she come home?" Amy asked. "Can we bring her to the mansion? Our room is big, enough for all of us." Home. They'd called it home. "The doctors need to make sure she's okay first," Albert said, kneeling to their level. "She was hurt badly. It'll take time for her to heal." "But she will heal, right?" Lily's voice carried an edge of fear. "She's not going to go back to sleep?" "No, sweetheart. She's awake now, and she's going to get better." The girls hugged him simultaneously, their relief palpable. Over their heads, Albert saw Marco approaching down the hallway, his expression grim. "Boss, we need to talk. Now." Albert's stomach dropped. "Girls, go with Rosa. She's in the waiting room. I'll be there in 5 minutes." Once they were out of earshot, Marco pulled Albert into an empty consultation room. "Peter Blake surfaced 2 hours ago," Marco said without preamble. "He was spotted at a bar in South Side, drunk and running his mouth, telling anyone who'd listen that his wife stole his kids and some rich bastard is keeping them hostage. Where is he now? We lost him. But boss, he's not just talking, he's armed, and he's asking around about your estate, your security, your routine. He's planning something." Albert's blood ran cold. "Double the security detail. I want armed guards with the girls at all times. No one in or out of the mansion without biometric confirmation. And I want Blake found. I don't care what it costs." "There's more." Marco hesitated. "Blake filed for custody this morning. Emergency petition claiming you kidnapped the children. He's using his ex-cop credentials, saying you're a known criminal and the kids are in danger." Albert laughed without humor. "He beats his wife into a coma and he's worried about the kids being in danger? Doesn't matter. He's got a lawyer, probably the only one desperate enough to take him on. Hearings scheduled for next week. Then I need a lawyer too. Get me the best family attorney in Illinois. Someone who can bury Blake's petition before it sees daylight. Already on it. But, Albert..." Marco's voice softened. "This is messy. If this goes public, if Blake pushes hard enough, there's going to be media attention. Scrutiny. Questions about your business." "I don't care," Albert said flatly. "Those are my daughters. He's not getting anywhere near them." When he returned to the waiting room, the girls were drawing pictures for their mother. Normal kid activity, except Amy was drawing a picture of Peter Blake with a big red X over him, and Lily's drawing showed their mom, in a hospital bed surrounded by protective walls. They couldn't even imagine safety without visualizing defense. That night, back at the mansion, Albert sat in his study with his new attorney, Patricia Morrison, a razor-sharp woman in her 50s who'd built a reputation destroying abusive spouses in court. "Let me be clear," Patricia said, reviewing the documents. "Peter Blake's petition is garbage. He has a documented history of domestic violence. He fled the scene of a crime. And he has outstanding warrants for assault. No judge with half a brain would grant him custody. So what's the problem?" "The problem is you, Mr. Russo." Patricia's gaze was unflinching. "You're not exactly father of the year material on paper. Your business dealings, your reputation, the fact that you only discovered paternity a week ago. Blake's lawyer is going to paint you as a dangerous criminal who manipulated a vulnerable woman and stole her children. I didn't steal them. They had nowhere else to go. I know that. But perception matters. We need to show that you're a stable, safe, committed father. Which means..." She pulled out a list. "Full background check, home study, character references, financial disclosure, and you'll need to demonstrate an ongoing relationship with the children that's in their best interests." Albert looked at the list, then at Patricia. "Whatever it takes." "Good. Because Blake's lawyer is going to dig up every unsavory thing you've ever done. And Mr. Russo, your history isn't exactly clean. Then make it clear that my past doesn't define my future, not when it comes to my daughters." The hearing was set for the following Thursday. Albert spent the intervening days preparing, cooperating with the background check, sitting through the home study interview, gathering character references from people who'd never seen this side of him. Rosa wrote a glowing letter about his transformation. Dr. Chen provided medical documentation showing Angelina's injuries and the twins' trauma. The therapist he'd hired for the girls submitted a report showing their positive adjustment to his care. But none of it stopped the dread coiling in his stomach. The night before the hearing, he couldn't sleep. He walked the mansion's hallways, checking security feeds, double-checking that the guards were alert. At 3 a.m, he found himself outside the twins' door. He eased it open quietly. They were tangled together in sleep, Lily's arm thrown over, Amy's chest, both clutching stuffed animals. Safe. Peaceful. Everything he'd never been at their age. Can't sleep either? Albert turned to find Angelina standing in the hallway, leaning heavily on a walker. She'd been released from the hospital 2 days ago and was staying in the mansion's ground-floor guest suite. Too weak to climb stairs, too vulnerable to be anywhere else. "What are you doing up?" Albert asked quietly, pulling the twins' door almost shut. Pain medication wore off. "I was going to the kitchen for water." She studied his face. "You're terrified." It wasn't a question. "I've faced rival organizations, federal investigations, near-death situations," Albert said. "None of it scared me like the thought of losing those girls." Angelina's expression softened. "You really love them." "They're mine. Of course I love them." "You didn't know they existed a week ago." "Doesn't matter. From the moment they knocked on my car window." He stopped, swallowing hard. Everything changed. They were quiet for a moment, the weight of 5 years of silence between them. "Why didn't you tell me?" Albert finally asked, the question that had been burning in him since the hospital. "Why did you disappear?" Angelina looked away, her fingers tightening on the walker. "Because I was scared. Of you. Of your world. Of what it would mean to bring children into it." "So you married Peter Blake instead?" Albert couldn't keep the bitterness out of his voice. "How did that work out?" "I didn't know what he was," Angelina said, her voice breaking. "He seemed safe. Normal. I thought I was protecting the girls from your world, and instead I brought them into hell." Albert saw tears streaming down her face, and his anger dissolved into something more complicated. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry for all of it. For leaving. For not telling you. For every choice that led to them being hurt." He could have stayed angry. Should have stayed angry. But looking at her, broken, grieving, drowning in guilt, he couldn't. "We'll talk about this later," he said quietly. "Right now, we need to focus on keeping them safe. Tomorrow's hearing." "I'm testifying," Angelina interrupted. "Patricia told me I don't have to because of my condition, but I am. Peter isn't getting near our daughters. Not while I'm breathing. Our daughters." The words did something to Albert's chest. "Okay," he said. "Then we fight him together." Angelina nodded, then hesitated. "Albert, if the judge asks the girls what they want, if it comes to choosing between me and you, it won't come to that. We're a team now, whether we like it or not." She smiled faintly. "I think I like it. Despite everything, you're good with them. Better than I expected. Low bar. Fair. But still true." She shifted her weight, wincing. "I should get back to bed. Long day tomorrow. Want help?" She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. Albert offered his arm, and she took it, letting him support her. wait as they walked slowly back to her room. At her door, she paused. "Thank you," she said. "For everything. For finding them in the cold. For keeping them safe. For being what they needed when I couldn't be." "You're their mother," Albert said simply. "You're what they needed most. I'm just their father," Angelina finished. "You're their father, Albert. And you're damn good at it." She disappeared into her room before he could respond. Albert stood in the empty hallway for a long moment, processing. Tomorrow he'd sit in a courtroom and let strangers judge whether he was fit to be a father. Tomorrow, Peter Blake would try to take his daughters away. But tonight, the girls were safe. Angelina was healing. And for the first time in 5 years, Albert had something worth fighting for that had nothing to do with power or territory or revenge. He had a family, and he'd destroy anyone who tried to take it away. The Cook County Courthouse was cold and impersonal, all marble and harsh, fluorescent lighting. Albert sat in the hallway outside Family Court, flanked by Patricia Morrison and Marco. Across from him, 50 feet away, Peter Blake lounged against the wall with his lawyer, a sweaty man in an ill-fitting suit who looked like he'd been practicing law in dive bars. Blake looked exactly like Albert had imagined. Mid-30s, average height, with the kind of face that could be charming until you looked closer and saw the cruelty in his eyes. He was sober now, dressed in a cheap button-down that didn't hide the nervous energy radiating off him. When Blake's eyes landed on Albert, his expression twisted into something ugly. "That's him," Albert heard Blake say to his lawyer, not bothering to lower his voice. "The gangster who stole my family. Look at him. Thinks he can buy anything, even other people's kids." Albert didn't react. He'd spent 20 years learning to control his impulses, to calculate before striking. But inside, the monster was screaming to cross that hallway and show Blake exactly what happened to men who hurt children. Patricia put a hand on his arm. "Don't. That's exactly what he wants. He's trying to provoke you." "It's working." "Then unwork it. You're not a thug today. You're a father fighting for custody. Act like it." The courtroom doors opened, and they were called inside. Judge Catherine Walsh presided, a woman in her 60s with silver hair and a reputation for being fair but uncompromising. She'd seen every kind of custody, battle, every manipulation tactic. This wouldn't be Albert's first time in court, but it was his first time as a defendant in a custody case, and the stakes had never been higher. Blake's lawyer went first, painting a picture of Albert as a dangerous criminal who'd kidnapped vulnerable children and was using his wealth and influence to manipulate the situation. He conveniently left out Peter's own criminal history, focusing instead on Albert's alleged connections to organized crime. "Your Honor," the lawyer said with practiced outrage. "Mr. Russo has no legal claim to these children. He appeared out of nowhere, took advantage of a traumatic situation, and is now using his resources to keep a father from his family." Patricia stood. "Objection. Mr. Blake is not the biological father of Amy and Lily Torres. DNA evidence will prove that Mr. Russo is their biological father, making him far more than nowhere." Judge Walsh raised an eyebrow. "You have DNA evidence?" Patricia submitted the lab results. "Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Russo is the biological father, and I'd like to point out that Mr. Blake has an active warrant for assault related to the hospitalization of Ms. Torres. He's hardly a victim here." Blake's lawyer sputtered. "The circumstances of Ms. Torres's injuries are under investigation. No charges have been filed against Mr. Blake." "Because the victim was in a coma," Patricia shot back. "But she's conscious now and prepared to testify." "Is Ms. Torres here?" Judge Walsh asked. "Yes, Your Honor." Angelina entered the courtroom, and every eye turned to her. She was thin, pale, moving slowly with a cane. The bruises on her face had faded to yellow and green, but they were still visible, still shocking. Peter Blake's face went white. Angelina took the witness stand, was sworn in, and faced the courtroom with her chin up despite the trembling in her hands. "Ms. Torres," Patricia began gently, "can you tell the court about your relationship?" "With Peter Blake?" Angelina's voice was steady. "We were married for 2 years. At first, he was kind, attentive. But after the wedding, things changed. He started drinking, getting angry, especially about the girls." "Did he ever hurt you?" "Yes, many times. He said Amy and Lily weren't his, that they were proof I'd been with someone else. He hated them, called them mistakes, said I should have gotten rid of them before they were born." Blake shifted in his seat, his lawyer gripping his arm to keep him quiet. "Did he hurt the children?" Patricia asked. "He never hit them directly, but he terrorized them, screamed at them, threw things, made them hide in closets while he beat me. They learned to be invisible around him, to make themselves small." Tears were streaming down Angelina's face now, but her voice didn't waver. "What happened the night you were hospitalized?" "I told Peter I was taking the girls and leaving. I'd saved enough for a bus ticket. We were going to leave while he was at work, but he came home early, found the packed bags. Her voice cracked. "He said if he couldn't have us, no one would. He beat me unconscious in front of the girls. They were screaming, trying to help me, but they were too small." Blake's lawyer stood. "Objection. This is inflammatory." "It's the truth," Angelina said, her eyes finding Peter's across the courtroom. "You almost killed me, and you traumatized our daughters. Amy still has nightmares where you're hurting me and she can't stop you. Lily wets the bed because her sense of safety is destroyed. They're 4 years old, Peter. 4. Judge Walsh's expression was granite. "Sit down, counsel. Ms. Torres will finish." "Do you believe the children are safe with Mr. Russo?" Patricia asked. "Yes," Angelina said without hesitation. "Albert is their biological father. He's provided them with safety, stability, therapy, everything they need. They feel safe with him in a way they never felt safe with Peter. And she looked at Albert for the first time. "I trust him with their lives." Patricia yielded the witness, and Blake's lawyer attempted to discredit Angelina, suggesting she was confused from her injuries, that she was being manipulated by Albert's wealth. It didn't work. Angelina's testimony was too raw, too specific, too obviously true. Then it was Albert's turn. He took the stand feeling exposed in a way he never had before. This wasn't a negotiation or a strategic play. This was his fitness as a father being judged, and the outcome would determine everything. Patricia walked him through the basics, how he'd met the girls, his relationship with Angelina 5 years ago, the DNA results confirming paternity. "Mr. Russo," Patricia said, "you have a reputation in Chicago, a complicated history. Why should this court believe you're capable of being a good father?" Albert looked directly at Judge Walsh. "Because those girls changed everything. Before I knew they were mine, before I even understood what was happening, they knocked on my car window and asked for help. And I couldn't walk away. I won't lie about my past. I've done things I'm not proud of. But those children, Amy and Lily, they're my chance to be better than what I was. And I won't fail them. What can you offer them that Mr. Blake cannot? Safety, stability, a father who will never raise a hand to them or their mother, a father who will protect them, not hurt them, a father who sees them as blessings, not mistakes." Blake's lawyer stood for cross-examination, clearly eager to destroy Albert's credibility. "Mr. Russo, isn't it true that you're involved in organized crime?" "I run several legitimate businesses," Albert said evenly. "That's not what I asked. You have connections to the Chicago mob, don't you?" I have connections to many organizations in this city. That doesn't make me a criminal. You've been investigated by federal authorities. Investigated, not charged, not convicted. The lawyer's frustration was visible. You expect this court to believe that a man with your reputation, your history, is suddenly father material? Albert leaned forward. I expect this court to consider what's best for two little girls who've already suffered more than any child should. I expect this court to recognize that their mother trusts me, that they feel safe with me, and that I have the resources to give them every advantage. But most importantly, I expect this court to compare what I'm offering to what Peter Blake is offering, and ask which future would you choose if those were your daughters. Judge Walsh called a brief recess. 20 minutes that felt like hours. Albert stepped into the hallway where the twins were waiting with Rosa, per court order. They weren't allowed in the courtroom, but they knew what was happening. Did you win? Amy asked immediately. I don't know yet, sweetheart. If you didn't, can we tell the judge we want to stay with you? Lily's voice was small but fierce. Albert knelt down. The judge is very smart. She'll make the right decision. When court reconvened, Judge Walsh's expression was unreadable. I've reviewed the evidence, heard testimony, and considered what's in the best interests of Amy and Lily Torres, she began. This court finds that Peter Blake presents a clear and present danger to these children based on his documented history of domestic violence and the credible testimony of Ms. Torres. His petition for custody is denied. Blake shot to his feet. This is bullshit. Those are my... Sit down, Mr. Blake, Judge Walsh said coldly, or I'll hold you in contempt. Furthermore, I'm granting a permanent restraining order. You are not to come within 500 feet of the children, Ms. Torres or Mr. Russo. She turned to Albert. As for you, Mr. Russo, your past concerns me, but your DNA results, Ms. Torres's testimony, and the clear bond these children have formed with you cannot be ignored. I'm granting you temporary custody, pending a full home study and 6-month review. If the children continue to thrive in your care, we'll revisit permanent custody at that time. Albert felt the tension drain from his body. Thank you, Your Honor. Don't thank me yet. I'll be watching closely. These children have been through hell. They deserve a father who will put them first, every time. Can you do that? Yes, Your Honor, I can. As they left the courtroom, Blake was screaming obscenities, being restrained by security. Angelina leaned on her cane, tears of relief streaming down her face. And Albert felt something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. Outside, the twins were waiting. When Rosa told them they could stay with Albert, they screamed with joy and threw themselves into his arms with such force he stumbled backward. We get to stay! We get to stay! Lily was chanting. You're really our daddy forever now? Amy asked, her eyes wide. Yeah, Albert said, his voice rough with emotion. I'm your daddy forever. They piled into the car, the girls chattering excitedly about redecorating their room, about bringing Mommy home permanently, about having a real family. Albert met Angelina's eyes across the back seat. She smiled at him, tentative but genuine. They'd won this battle. But as they drove away from the courthouse, Albert saw Peter Blake standing on the steps, watching them leave. The rage in his eyes was unmistakable. This wasn't over. Not yet. 3 months later, spring arrived in Chicago like a promise kept. The snow melted, revealing green beneath. The trees along Albert's estate bloomed with white flowers. And inside the mansion that had once been a monument to isolation, life had taken root. Angelina had recovered slowly but steadily. The cane was gone, replaced by occasional headaches and a wariness that Albert suspected would take years to fade completely. She'd moved into the main house properly now, her room on the same floor as the twins, close enough to hear them if they called for her in the night. She and Albert existed in a careful dance, co-parents bound by shared love for their daughters, but uncertain how to be anything else to each other. There were moments, though. Moments when their hands would brush reaching for the same coffee cup. Moments when Albert would catch her watching him play with the girls. Something soft in her expression. Moments when the past felt less like an ending and more like an intermission. The twins had blossomed. Therapy helped. Stability helped. But mostly they healed because they finally felt safe. The nightmares came less frequently. Amy hadn't wet the bed in 6 weeks. Lily had started kindergarten and made her first real friend. They called Albert Daddy now without hesitation, and every time they said it, his heart did something complicated. Peter Blake had disappeared after the custody hearing. Not legally. The restraining order was active, and he'd missed 2 court dates for the assault charges. But physically, he'd vanished. No sightings, no contact. Albert's people had searched, but Blake had gone to ground somewhere. Albert told himself to be grateful, to let it go. But something in his gut said this wasn't over. He was right. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon in late March. Angelina had taken the twins to the park, their first outing without security in weeks. Albert had argued against it, but Angelina needed to feel normal again, needed to prove to herself that Peter couldn't control her life forever. They'd been gone for an hour when Albert's phone rang. Angelina's number. He answered expecting to hear about a scraped knee or a request to pick up ice cream on the way home. Instead, he heard screaming. "Albert!" Angelina's voice was pure panic. "He's here. Peter's here. He's trying to take the girls." Albert's blood turned to ice. "Where exactly are you?" "Lincoln Park by the..." The line cut off into chaos. Children crying, Angelina yelling, a man's voice, slurred and furious. Albert was already moving, phone to his ear, barking orders to Marco. "Lincoln Park, now, every man we have. Blake's trying to take the girls." He made it to the park in 12 minutes that felt like 12 hours. His car screeched to a stop near a crowd that had gathered, parents pulling their own children away from whatever was happening in the center. Albert shoved through the crowd and saw red. Peter Blake had Lily in his arms, trying to drag her toward a beat-up sedan. The little girl was screaming, fighting with everything she had. Amy was on the ground, crying, her knee bleeding. And Angelina. Angelina was between Blake and the car, her body a shield despite her terror. "She's mine," Blake was yelling, drunk and desperate. "My daughter. You can't keep her from me." "She's not yours," Angelina screamed back. "You're not on the birth certificate. You have no rights. I raised her. I fed her. He didn't finish because Albert was suddenly there, his hand clamping around Blake's wrist with crushing force. "Let her go." Blake's head whipped around, his eyes widening when he saw Albert. For a second, fear broke through the alcohol haze. Then stupid bravado took over. "This is my family," Blake slurred. "You can't just take them because you're rich. I have rights." "You gave up your rights when you put Angelina in a coma," Albert said, his voice deadly calm. "You gave up your rights when you terrorized 4-year-old girls. Now let go of my daughter before I break every bone in your hand." Blake's grip loosened slightly, and Albert scooped Lily away from him, passing her to Angelina. Then he turned back to Blake. Every instinct screamed to hurt him, to make him pay for every bruise on Angelina's face, every nightmare the twins had, every moment of fear they'd lived through. Albert could feel the monster inside him clawing for release, demanding blood. But Lily was watching. Amy was watching. And Angelina was watching. He'd promised to be better than his past. "You're done," Albert said quietly. "The police are already on their way. You violated a restraining order. You attempted kidnapping, and I have about 50 witnesses." Blake's face crumpled, the bravado collapsing into pathetic desperation. I just wanted to see them. They're all I have. You never had them, Angelina said, finding her voice. You hurt them. You scared them. You destroyed any chance of being in their lives the moment you chose violence over love. Sirens wailed in the distance. Blake looked around wildly, realizing he was trapped. He lunged for Albert one last time, a clumsy swing that Albert dodged easily. Marco and 2 other security guards appeared, restraining Blake as the police arrived. The arrest was quick. Blake went into the squad car still yelling, still insisting the girls were his, still refusing to accept that he'd lost. Albert knelt where Amy sat on the ground, examining her scraped knee. You okay, sweetheart? I tried to. Stop him, Amy said, her voice shaking. I kicked him like you taught me in safety class. But he was too strong. You were so brave, Albert said, pulling her into his arms. Both of you. I'm so proud of you. Lily was still crying against Angelina's shoulder, traumatized but safe. Angelina herself was pale and shaking, but her voice was steady when she spoke. It's over, she said, looking at Albert. It's really over now. Yeah, Albert agreed. It is. 6 months later, on a warm September afternoon, Judge Walsh reviewed Albert's home study, the therapist's reports, the twins' school records, and Angelina's testimony about their family life. Mr. Russo, she said, I'm pleased to grant permanent custody. The children are thriving. You've demonstrated commitment, stability, and genuine care for their well-being. Congratulations. Albert nodded, unable to speak past the emotion in his throat. That night, they celebrated with pizza and ice cream in the mansion's kitchen, a far cry from the formal dining room Albert used to eat in alone. The twins wore matching dresses Angelina had bought, their hair in pigtails, their faces bright with happiness. Are we going to have the same last name now? Lily asked, tomato sauce on her chin. If that's what you want, Albert said. Would you like to be Lily Russo? Both girls nodded enthusiastically. And Amy Russo. Then that's what we'll do. After dinner, after baths and stories and goodnight kisses, after the girls finally fell, asleep tangled together in their bed, Albert found Angelina sitting on the terrace overlooking the grounds. She'd been different lately, softer with him, less careful. Sometimes he'd catch her looking at him the way she used to, 5 years ago, when they'd been falling in love before fear drove her away. Thank you, she said as he joined her. For today, for the last 6 months, for everything. They're my daughters. It's not something to thank me for. It is, though. You didn't have to step up the way you did. You could have provided financial support and kept your distance. Instead, you became the father they needed. The father you never had. Albert was quiet for a moment. I spent 20 years being angry at my father. Angry at the world. Building walls and calling it strength. And then 2 little girls knocked on my car window, and every wall I'd built just crumbled. They have that effect, Angelina said softly. I spent 2 years trying to protect them from your world, from who I thought you were. I was so wrong, Albert. You're not the dangerous man I was afraid of. Or maybe you are. But you're capable of so much love, so much gentleness. Only with them. With you. The words hung in the air between them. Angelina turned to look at him, and Albert saw something shift in her expression. Albert, She stopped, searching for words. 5 years ago, I ran because I was scared. But I think I was really running from how much I loved you, how much I wanted to trust you but couldn't trust myself to choose right. And then I chose Peter, and it was the worst decision I've ever made. You can't know that, Albert said quietly. Maybe if you'd stayed with me, my world would have hurt you worse. Maybe. No. Angelina shook her head firmly. I've had 6 months to watch you with our daughters, to see how you protect without controlling, how you love without possessing. That's not the man Peter was, and I was a fool to think you were. The dangerous choice. She moved closer, close enough that Albert could smell her shampoo, see the way her hands trembled slightly. I don't expect anything, she continued. I don't expect you to forgive me for leaving, or for keeping the girls from you, or for the mess I made. But I want you to know that I'm falling in love with you again, with who you are now, with the father you've become. And if someday you could... Albert kissed her, not gently, not carefully, but like a man who'd been drowning and finally found air. Angelina gasped against his mouth, then melted into him, her hands fisting in his shirt. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Albert rested his forehead against hers. I never stopped, he said roughly. 5 years, Angelina. I never stopped loving you. Then why didn't you look for me? Because you asked me not to. Your note said I'd understand someday. I thought you'd found someone better, someone safer. I didn't know about the girls. Angelina's eyes filled with tears. I'm so sorry. For all the time we lost. For... Stop, Albert said, wiping her tears with his thumb. We can't change the past. But we have right now. We have our daughters sleeping upstairs. We have a future we can build together. If that's what you want. It's all I want, Angelina whispered. They stood there on the terrace as the sun set over Chicago. 2 broken people who'd found their way back to each other through the love of 2 little girls, who'd refused to let either of them stay lost. 8 months later, Christmas Eve. The mansion was transformed. Lights sparkled on a massive tree in the living room. Stockings hung on the mantel, 4 of them now, embroidered with names: Albert, Angelina, Amy, Lily. The air smelled of sugar cookies and pine and something that felt suspiciously like happiness. Amy and Lily, now 5 years old, were in their matching pajamas, bouncing with barely contained excitement as they helped Angelina arrange cookies for Santa. Albert watched from the doorway, struck by the surreality of it all. A year ago, he'd been alone in this house. Christmas just another day, marked by empty tradition. Now it was chaos and laughter and sticky fingers and arguments over who got to put the star on the tree. Now it was home. Daddy! Lily called, noticing him. Come help! We need someone tall to put the cookies on the high shelf so Santa doesn't miss them. Daddy. The word still hit him right in the chest, every time. He crossed the room, lifted Lily onto his shoulders, and let her place the plate exactly where she wanted it. Amy directed the whole operation with serious precision, making sure everything was perfect. Later, after the girls were finally asleep, after checking on them 3 times to make sure they were really out, Albert found Angelina in their bedroom. Their bedroom. She'd moved in officially 2 months ago, and Albert still sometimes woke up surprised to find her there, warm and real beside him. They're asleep, he reported. Finally. Angelina smiled, reaching for him. Come here. He went, letting her pull him down onto the bed, wrapping his arms around her. I have something to tell you, she said, and there was something in her voice that made Albert's heart skip. What? She took his hand and placed it on her stomach. We're pregnant. The world stopped. Are you serious? 8 weeks. I found out yesterday. I wanted to wait until Christmas to tell you. Albert's hand remained on her stomach, his mind racing. Another child. Another chance to get it right from the beginning this time. Another piece of the family he'd never let himself dream of having. Albert? Angelina's voice held a trace of worry. Say something. He kissed her, slow and deep, and full of every emotion he couldn't put into words. When he pulled back, his eyes were wet. Best Christmas gift ever, he said roughly. Angelina laughed, the sound bright and free. The girls are going to lose their minds when we tell them. They're going to be amazing big sisters. They lay there in the dark, Angelina's head on his chest, his hand still resting on the place where their future was growing. Outside, snow began to fall, soft and white and pure. Inside, Albert Russo, former enforcer, mob boss, man who'd built an empire on fear, held his family close and finally understood what power really meant. Not control, not dominance, not the ability to hurt. Power was this moment, this love, this choice to be better than his past, stronger than his demons, worthy of the trust these people had placed in him. The little girls upstairs who'd knocked on his car window on the coldest night of winter had saved him in ways they'd never understand. They'd given him purpose, given him love, given him a reason to fight for redemption instead of revenge. And he would spend the rest of his life making sure they never regretted it. Sometimes, salvation comes from the most unexpected places. Sometimes it knocks on your car window in the freezing dark, two small hands pressed against the glass, asking if you can help. Albert Russo learned that strength isn't measured by who fears you. It's measured by who feels safe enough to fall asleep in your arms. It's measured by choosing to kneel down to a child's level and promising, "You're safe now." And Angelina learned that trust isn't about finding someone who'll never hurt you. It's about finding someone who'll fight like hell to protect you when the rest of the world tries. Maybe that's what family is. Not perfection. Not safety guaranteed. Just people who choose each other every single day and refuse to let go even when it would be easier to walk away. Even in the darkest moments when everything seems lost, there's always a chance for redemption. A chance to choose differently. A chance to become more than your past. You just have to be brave enough to open the door when someone knocks. If this story touched something in your heart, we'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. What moment hit you hardest? Have you ever found family in unexpected places? Hit that like button to support stories about second chances, and subscribe to our channel because we post new emotional journeys every single day that'll make you believe broken people can heal. Before you go, check out our next video about a mafia boss who discovers the waitress he saved is carrying his child, or explore our playlist for more tales of dangerous men learning that the strongest thing they can do is love fearlessly. Thank you for being here. Thank you for believing in redemption. And remember, you're always one choice away from changing your life completely. Good night, and stay safe out there.